in a normal Shamir methodology. The bits people haven't seen in where we're talking about all these funky things like interpolation and whatever else is this little bit at the bottom. What if your private key doesn't ever exist? What if we can actually use the key slices rather than recreating the key and then having it exist and trusting that someone will actually delete it in a homomorphic scheme that allows you to propagate transactions without ever having a private key, without ever having a way to lose a private key. That's what I've been doing. So, reliability. Think of RAID. We can do this for yourself. I can have part of my key on my phone, part of my key on my computer, and part in my mind. I can now couple that with unlock time type contracts so that if I die, there's a way for my family to recover. I'm a control freak, my wife will tell you. I like to manage the you-know-what out of everything, and she'll quite happily sit there and go, yes, Craig's a total control. Anyway, the simple thing is, I also want to make sure that if something happens, my family's taken care of. With Bitcoin right now, that's a problem. That's what we're going to change. And we're a research organisation. We are a think tank. Our business plans, my effectively underwear name ones. Yes, people will partner with us and we'll do deals with shares, and Stefan can work about all that shit because, quite frankly, I don't care. This is why I get in trouble with tax people, because they say, what are you doing for business? And I go, well, I'm inventing stuff. And they go, how do you make money? I don't care. So that's what we're doing. If you're incapacitated, you lose it, you have theft, whatever else, you're safe. We can even take this further because we can match transactions on an exchange without the exchange knowing what the transaction has been matched. So we can do a blinded threshold system. So in the next year, we're going to have all this stuff coming out. And basically the idea would be the exchange doesn't even know what they're matching. So anyone who knows how an exchange works with the limit order book and all the rest, and all the rest, and I'm sure there's plenty of Bitcoin traders here who sit there watching every little tick. We don't care at the exchange what you're actually trading anymore. And in fact, with the threshold blinding system, I could actually split the transaction between 3 separate exchanges and 3 separate continents, and I'm only facilitating, I'm acting like the Australian Stock Exchange I used to work for used to do. They don't care about the trade, they're facilitating. And that's what we're going to do with a peer system. We're going to facilitate. We're going to allow people to publicly sign, open up documents, create, put records of contracts on the blockchain again. Everyone's used to do this. 2011, 2012, 2013, it was big. Then we sit there and say, we can't do it, it's spam. It's not spam. So, we are doing a dealerless distribution, and we're going to extend some of these things so that we can sign code and generate signatures, and you don't ever get the key. And no, we don't have a problem with the ephemeral K value either. So when you're doing, for those who know ECDSA, the ephemeral version of the key, the K, that if you get that, you can reverse and get the private key. We don't care because that's also thresholded and shared. There's no 1K version. We have all this. And do you know what we need to change in Bitcoin to do this? Nothing. I do not need a single protocol change at all. So, whether people like it or not, it's going to happen. We can distribute key generation as much as we want. Another little thing we can do is we can reshare private keys without it having to be on a block. So I've stolen some things from Shawm and other people who came after him with these things. And we have an updated version that does what Sean wanted without some of the vulnerabilities. We're not centralized, which means we don't need Lightning. Because if I give you a share and I can provably remove the share and make that share now invalid with using a zero knowledge proof, you now have control of the key, provably. And it hasn't happened on block. So we're going to release ways of doing off-block transfers that are instantaneous, that appear, and also don't require any protocol changes. So we also have hierarchies. So we can set this any way we want. Say we've got an n equals 100 in our organization. I can have a threshold value of 61 shares required to vote. And I can set up each of these little bits of the hierarchy so that we have someone has 15 shares, 15, 15, 45 in the distributed part down here, etc. And if you're Mark Zuckerberg and you want to have your 25% of the shares in your family but still have 50% of control, you can. However you want to create any DAC, voting organisation, whatever else, we can do. So you can make these nice little complex hierarchical structures, and it's all in Bitcoin. We can assign seller, obligation, duty. If we can assign goods, we can assign ownership. And once we start opening up tokens again, and we put this on the blockchain, then we assign everything. So I want you to think about, instead of an ICO and a how do I raise a $100 billion scam, think about someone having a house. Think, instead of a housing crisis, you have 5% equity in your home. How about you put out a smart contract linked to what you will do, your payment schedule. If you don't pay, some of your rent that you didn't pay comes out of your equity. If you do pay, you buy on market more of your house. You go out there and you raise it based on a deal. And not because 50% say X, Y, or Z and control things, but because you've actually put down what you will do. And if you maintain your house, we have an incentive now, not to, like renters do, trash the place. We have an incentive to actually increase the value. We also have other ways of thinking about this in that, for instance, if there is a housing crash, there's a depression, there's whatever else, it's a great time now as a homeowner to actually buy a little bit more of your home because you're no longer underwater. If you actually own equity rather than debt, you never go negative. Your 5% remains your 5%. And if the house halves in value and you were going to buy another 5%, now you buy 10. So, not a bad system. Assignment. If we can start trading these things, think of what insurance becomes when we start housing around the world. I want to own a percentage in Sydney, a percentage in Brisbane, a little bit in New York, somewhere in a Cherokee territory, somewhere in London, because in diversifying my portfolio, I decrease my risk. I decrease my risk of something happening to any of the properties, of someone defaulting, of someone going bad on their loan. And I can automate this, not in hierarchies of CDOs that no one can ever understand that are probably 100 million pages long, but in something that I can click a button and actually have an answer from an automated system. That's what Bitcoin will give us. We have exponential growth. Once we start thinking what we can do here, think everything that we can tack to all these systems. Once we can start instantly transferring shares and matching values, we can have fast transactions, not the small type of stuff, things that other people who, Mike Hearn was very good with this one, the whole idea of instantaneous transfers of wealth between people with shares so that you can do fast trades algorithmically. Not a bad thing. So, tokens, they are a financial instrument. ICOs are financial instruments, and they enable us to actually do transfers without intermediaries. They enable us to start opening up global commerce. When we can start actually tokenizing access to music, tokenizing access to someone's home, to selling an experience, etc. That's when we start thinking that we don't just have first world, even second world commerce. We have global commerce. If we start thinking the people, the unbanked, the underbanked, we have half the world's population in need. Half the world's population who can be opened up to a bigger economy. Not that little pie, but a pie of size we have never imagined. A global expansion we have never imagined. And it's not because of this word equality that everyone says. I mean, this is a nice little image I found. Equality is everyone standing there equal. It's, I have the same as you. There's only one way in this universe to be equal. We can be equally poor. That's it. You can never pull someone up to be equal. You can only drive people down. What matters is equity. Equity is where we start actually building for people and opening up opportunities. And no, even if we start now, even if Africa has 12% growth because of something, it's going to be a long time before they catch up. But that's not the issue. Imagine what the alternative is if it doesn't happen for them. If they sit there stagnating at 3%, 4% growth even, they will get nowhere. They will get further behind. A world where people can trade, more ideas, more education, more people offering something is what we're hoping to build. So we don't compete with banks. I don't care what people say. Bitcoin does not compete with banks. If you think it does, you don't understand banking at all. Banks allocate risk. Banks do more than just act as a depository. A bank isn't a depository. There are problems with banks at the moment. The biggest one happens to do with the fact that they have 10% capital reserves, sometimes less, sometimes more, and they get to float money supplies up and down, which was the whole point of the article that the Chancellor was actually there forcing banks to do his whim. That's the problem. Banks react like everyone else. They react to incentives because they're not evil, we're not evil. Very few of us are evil. There are some people on this earth who are evil, but the majority of us, well, we might be arseholes, we might be curmudgeons, we might be many other things. But the reality is we want to live our lives in peace. Most of us don't want to burn the world down. The majority of the world wants to actually live and trade in harmony, like it or not. We have sources of capital. How do we consolidate them? ICOs, the way they are, aren't that answer. Raising money properly, having a decent product, doing what Lighthouse was actually meant to do, what Mike Hearn had worked on, that makes a good basis for something. If you don't raise it, then the money goes back. Many things you can do to actually do this and minimize risk. How do you actually allocate this money? These are the questions we need to think about. So we don't replace all of these features here. We don't change the world, but we do. Not because we're trying to stomp on people. We don't want to wreck anyone's lives. We don't want to burn the world and make it anew. I'm not Mr. Robot, I'm sorry. I want this world better. I don't want equality. I want equity. I don't want to push someone down. I want to help people get up. I want them to have an opportunity to trade. I don't want to give people money. I don't want to hand them a fish. I want to teach them how they can be part of the world. That's what Bitcoin does. That's why we don't want to burn the system down. That's what it can do. That's the promise of this system. Exchanging wealth